Hello everyone, it's us, but you knew that already. What you may not know is what's coming up on this show, which we are chasing and fading on the diamond. Our analysts are fighting each other, punching each other in the face, and we're going to dig deep and find you some hidden jewels.
Speaking of digging deep, if you are still digging deep, gearing up for your fantasy football draft, we've got the top RB handcuffs you would be crazy to ignore.
Yes, you would. And how about some NBA draft strategies for you? Oh, and if you're down with the tennis, pay attention.
So now you know what's coming up on the sweat, which starts right now. Woo-hoo!
What up, what up? This is The Sweat, here every night at 6 o'clock Eastern Time. Getting you set for the night and week ahead in fantasy sports. Watch now, thank us later when you're filthy rich from winning. Alongside Jessie Coffield, I'm Emerson Lotzia.
And we got 1 hour to go until Tuesday night's slate of games gets underway around Major League Baseball. And here to help us out is our baseball panel of Steve Buchanan, Julian Edlow, and Zach Thompson. Gentlemen, we go right into chase or fade. There are 7 pitchers above 10K tonight, and you've got to play one of them. Steve, are you chasing or fading this?
Yeah, you absolutely have to chase this one. I mean, 1, how about maybe 2? Can you play 3? Maybe we could do 3. I mean, there's just way too much talent on this slate tonight that it's extremely hard to fade. I mean, look at even Clay freaking Buchholz is at 10K tonight, and I'm sitting here pondering if I want to use him or not. Clay Buchholz, this is where we're at right now. I mean, look, there are some enticing options under 10K. You got Kyle Freeland against the Angels, Julio Teheran against the Rays, even Jacob Junis against the Tigers. But I'll tell you, if you're fading all the 10K plus guys tonight, come over and get a beer, because it's going to be a hell of a night watching you sweat all those pitchers going tonight. It's a really tough one to do, but you can definitely do it.
Zach, what about you? Do you think you've got to play one of those pitchers over 10K?
I do not think you have to. You can bulk up on your bats and then go with some of those cheaper options. I like Cole Hamels just under 10K, Charlie Morton, Kyle Freeland, as Steve mentioned, and even Madison Bumgarner was pretty good his last time out, and he's only 9K. Hamels has been excellent since going to the Cubs. 3 earned runs over 34 innings, and he's facing the Mets. I think you can definitely play him as your ace, and he's under 10K.
All right, so Julian, you got a lot of options above 10K. Do you think you got to play one of them?
Yeah, Buchanan loses here. This is a fade for me. You definitely don't have to play a pitcher over 10K. There's 15 games. There's 30 pitchers. 7 of them are over 10K. That leaves 23 other pitchers. There's plenty to choose from. Obviously, you can play guys over 10K. There's some really good ones. My favorites, Max Scherzer, Flaherty, Carrasco, all really good options. But you look just below that, Charlie Morton is 9,500. I don't hate him. I've got a hidden jewel for you later that is well under 10K that you can definitely lock into your lineup. And the guy that we're going to talk about next is almost half of 10K. There are 23 pitchers under 10K is the way that I look at this, and plenty of them work. You're practically admitting that you're fading all these huge bats on this slate if you're paying up for pitching too much tonight.
Excellent segue, Julian. Way to clap back there at Steven. So after all that, yes, for the low price of $5,500, King Felix is a lock for your SP2 spot, Julian?
Well, you would think I would be chasing this, but again, there's so many pitchers. I will fade this because King Felix sucks. He just does not pitch very well to anybody, anywhere. So the only reason that he is worth rostering is because the reason that salary is so low, this guy was going to go to the bullpen. He was so bad. And then when Paxton went to the DL, they had to insert him back in the rotation. So because of the spot, because of the lineup he's facing, if you're paying up for Scherzer, you almost have to go down this low to pair him with Hernandez. But there are guys in that mid-range, in that 7,000 to 8,000 range, guys that touch up almost near 10K that I think you can do just fine rostering and kind of going in the middle with your pitching.
Steve, go ahead. Just take it from here.
Thank you. I mean, look at Hernandez is not an option at all. I'm sorry. It's not even an option. He's averaging 6. Just 6 DK fantasy points on the road this season. So that you might say, oh, well, I guess he hasn't pitched that much on the road. Oh, no. It's been 60-plus innings. 378 WOBA with a 5.92 FIP. He is not striking out guys out like he used to. If the season ended today, his K percentage and swing and miss rate would be the lowest of his career across the board. This guy is just not getting it done. Sure, the plus side is he's 5,500, and it leaves you a ton of wiggle room for your bats, but you're just going to be making up from the negative points he's probably going to get tonight. So I don't know how much good that's going to do. Yeah, you'll be able to shove some bats in there, but you got that -5 DK fantasy point projection that I have him for. How do you like that one on your lineup?
Sweatometer.
Sweatometer. Yikes.
Meltdown
Burning
here
down
in
the
studio.
house. Yeah, wow.
Zach, so what are you doing? Because if you're going to be taking one of those super expensive pitchers, you're going to need someone, obviously, who isn't going to cost you as much. What are the chances you're going to roster this dude?
I'm making it unanimous. It's definitely a fade. 6 games since the All-Star break, 0-4 with a 7.42 ERA. Definitely not a lock. I think you spend down, go with like a Cole Hamels or some of those other options that we mentioned. And then there's some good options in the 7K range with Lance Lynn, Matthew Boyd, even the Toronto starter Pannone, who pitched really well last time out against the Orioles. He's got him again. It's another way you can go. I think rather than paying way up and way down, meet in the middle and avoid King Felix. Even though he probably is the best option under 6K, I'm fading him tonight.
All right, Julian, I'm going to act like I didn't read your top stacks of the night and say, Steve, and say you must fade the Dodgers tonight, chase or fade.
Okay, well here I will continue fading the Dodgers because you have to have some exposure to this lineup one way or another on this slate. Look, we have 15 games, but you're either playing multiple GPP lineups most likely on a huge slate, or you're sticking to one cash lineup. And there's no way that you can afford to fade a lineup projected for almost 7 runs on your cash team if that's the route you're going. And if you're building multiple GPPs, there's no way that you can afford not to have this offense either. Whether you want to sprinkle them in smaller stacks of 2, 3, 4 bats rather than going all the way to 5 in GPPs is fine. But in any fashion of this 15-game slate, you have to have exposure here one way or another. And that's another reason that you don't have to roster 10K pitchers, because these bats are expensive, but it's just too good of a matchup. This Rangers pitcher cannot get people out. I don't want to try and say his name, but he can't get people out.
Steve with the eye roll. The
Yeah,
Dodgers,
hardcore eye roll.
They are projected for 6.6 runs tonight. So, Steve, you must fade the Dodgers tonight, chase or fade?
Yeah, I'll fade them. Gerardo, that's the one I'm going to say it once. That's my guess at him. But he's just been brutal. I mean, he's not even worth finding out how to say his last name because he's probably not even in the majors much longer. I mean, in the short time he's been in the majors, 5.72 FIP in 32 1/3 innings pitched, 45% hard hit rate is what he's allowing. Look, the Dodgers are absolutely mashing the ball over the past 2 weeks. 352 WOBA with a 193 isolated power. If you're fading the Dodgers tonight based on salary alone, I can completely understand, because you should be paying for at least one 10K plus pitcher tonight, but you're absolutely not fading them because of the matchup, because their matchup is fantastic. That would not be the reason to fade them. So I can understand if your salary is constraining you from doing so, but matchup based, go for it, baby.
Zach, what are you going to do here? We already heard Steve's argument that you might just not have the money, but are you fading the Dodgers tonight?
I am fading the Dodgers, which means I'm chasing them. This matchup's too good. I mean, Ariel Gerardo isn't that hard to say, but apparently he does struggle with pitching. He's given up 5 home runs in his last 3 starts, and he has a 1.072 OPS against left-handed bats. So especially target Bellinger, Muncy, and Peterson in the Dodgers lineup. I think they're the way you want to go. Some of the bats are expensive, so you can't go too all in unless you're going really cheap on pitching, but definitely get some of those lefties in Texas where the conditions are going to be great for home runs.
All right, fantastic stuff. Thank you, friends. We'll see you back here in about 15 minutes for Steve's top 3 picks of the night.
Tyler Selvin here with your DraftKings Fantasy Flash. When healthy, Jordan Reed is one of the more lethal fantasy options at the tight end position. The only problem is that he's rarely healthy. Reed has never played a full 16-game schedule in his career, and last year was held to just 6 games after having to go under the knife to repair both of his big toes. Heading into 2018, however, Redskins head coach Jay Gruden announced that Reed is on pace to be ready for Week 1. It's still worth monitoring Reed as we inch closer to the regular season, but there is optimism that he'll be ready to roll in the opening slate. And as for his prospects for Week 1, Reed is currently starting at the 7th highest priced tight end at $4K and has an opportunity to work with new Redskins quarterback Alex Smith, who loves throwing to tight ends. With the Chiefs last season, Smith and Travis Kelce connected on 83 passes for over 1,000 yards and 8 scores, so the opportunity is there for Reed to produce. That said, he does currently have some competition at the tight end spot, with Vernon Davis also on Washington's roster, who has some history with Smith back in their days with the 49ers.
9 days away from NFL kickoff, so let's welcome in Ian Hartitz and Reed Fowler. And before you help us address running back handcuffs, we have some big fantasy news breaking today.
Indeed we do, young lady. In Seattle, Doug Baldwin, dealing with a sore knee, has only practiced twice this summer, saying he's only 85% right now, will not be 100% all season long. So, Reed, how much does this hurt his draft stock right now, and who around him could see their value on the rise?
Well, I think this hurts it a lot, especially when you think that the healthiest you're going to be is the preseason. I mean, that's when you have the most time off. That's when you have the recovery that you're able to do. So for the most part, this is the healthiest you're going to be. Now, if Doug Baldwin is saying that at best he's going to be 80 to 85%, that scares me quite a bit, because he's going late second, early third as your wide receiver one, potentially, if you went running back with your first pick in those earlier rounds. Guys like Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen, the duo there in Minnesota, I think their stock goes up. But even around him where he's ranked, Amari Cooper, Tyreek Hill, you have Allen Robinson. These guys all have question marks, including Doug Baldwin. So I would probably go down a little bit and bump up Thielen. I would probably take Thielen over Diggs, but those would be a couple of guys that I'd be targeting. But then again, you're probably reaching a round early for those guys. So this does hurt your Doug Baldwin stock quite a bit.
What about for you, Ian? Let's just say you haven't had your fantasy draft yet. You see Doug Baldwin on the board pretty early. Pretty good chance that you're going to say, yeah, I'm going to pass on this guy right now after his comments today?
I don't think so. I mean, look, we knew he was entering week one with a knee injury anyway. It's not ideal to hear him come out and say that he's not 100%, but I mean, I think that's kind of what we expected. So we're still looking at a Seattle offense that has, arguably it's top 5 unit and the most targets left over from last year, with Jimmy Graham and Paul Richardson gone. So I still think there's honestly so many targets to go around in Seattle that even 85% Doug Baldwin is more than capable of, being a productive fantasy receiver.
So, Ian, who in your mind, though, whose stock is on the rise, maybe with Doug Baldwin obviously not being 100%? Anyone on his team, anyone else on other teams on the draft board?
Yeah, I think it's Tyler Lockett. He's had a leg injury a little bit during camp. He's always kind of got a little injury going on, but he appears to at least be ready to go in week one. And I mean, this is a guy we've seen flash and make big plays at the NFL level, which is, a lot more than we can say for most Seattle receivers, save for 35-year-old Brandon Marshall. So I'll at least take the guy with, some proven big play ability on the Seahawks offense.
I will say, Ian is right. I mean, there's 175 targets that are left from those guys leaving. If we see an increase, even if we see an 85% Doug Baldwin, those targets are there. If he gets a bunch of targets and he's really their only spot, if Rashad Penny doesn't lose his 15 pounds that he's gained over the offseason, that's not too much of a deal. But that's a ton of production. So again, you could probably draft him, but at the same time, long term, potentially look at trading him if he comes out hot and gets 10 targets and a touchdown and 80 yards, whatever it may be.
Another big-time wide receiver dealing with injury is Philadelphia's ALSHON Jeffrey, and ESPN is reporting his injured shoulder will keep him out for at least the first 2 games of the season. So how do you approach drafting this guy now, and who could benefit from his absence, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't an injury that really popped up on us. Alshon's been on the PUP list all training camp. And, I mean, he came out last year. I mean, he obviously had a nice, great Super Bowl, had some big plays throughout the year, but wasn't really the overall performance we've grown accustomed to seeing. And he said his shoulder limiting him was partially to blame for that. So, I mean, now we already know we're missing at least 2 games, and we're going to get an injured Alshon coming back in, hopefully week 3, and we already have evidence that he won't be the same player when he's playing hurt. So definitely a situation I'm looking to avoid for the time being. In terms of guys on his teams that could benefit, Nelson Aguilar is now the clear-cut Eagles wide receiver 1, which would have been an insane statement to make this time last year. But he's obviously set up well in the slot there, and I think Zach Ertz now has an even larger red zone role. So plenty of guys, obviously to pick up the slack while Jeffrey's gone. And could be more of a situation where 5 more Mousy instead of one guy in particular really jumping forward.
Reed, what's your take?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, Alshon Jeffrey, we saw a lot of touchdowns. I mean, probably I think he had around 9 or 10 or so around there last year, but he only caught about half of his targets thrown to him. Like Alshon Jeffrey is touchdown dependent. We saw he's a big bodied receiver. And so you look at that and you say, okay, all these targets that he was catching touchdown, he only ended up, I think, 21, around 22 wide receiver, playing 16 games. Now you lose him for 2 games of 14. That's pretty tough. I think Ian is right. You look at Zach Ertz, even the guy that Ian's probably going to mention a little bit later. You look at those running backs that potentially, those pass catching running backs that could get some of those targets. Mike Wallace is potentially a DFS play. But yeah, Nelson Aguilar is the guy that's going to get an increase. But even then, you're taking those guys late. So I'm staying away from Alshon. Just stay away from that, because especially with the shoulder injury and him being in sort of the mid part of his career, I don't think you're going to have to reach on him.
All right, guys, we're running tight on time right now, so if you could speed up your answers, that would be fantastic, especially you, Reed. Talking PPR leagues here, we know Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson, Todd Gurley are the top running backs, but who are the specific handcuffs you should be targeting?
Yeah, I'm going to start just with the top guy that I want to do. In handcuffs, obviously, you have to look at that definition pretty fluidly in terms of how NFL is being played now. But James Conner is probably my top handcuff if we're looking at sort of that pure definition of these guys aren't necessarily going to play a lot of downs. You look at Le'Veon Bell's production. He had the highest in terms of touches, all his career high. And if he's holding out, and what we saw last year where he was a little slow to start and potentially he doesn't want to get hurt or whatever the case may be, there's so many question marks out there. You look at Conner, he is in a spot where he could pick up 75% of that production. So he'd be my top handcuff, obviously extremely late, big last round, so you're not losing any stock in terms of your earlier draft picks.
Ian, the handcuffs you are targeting right now are who?
Yeah, so I'm not a big fan of taking these handcuffs that are just simply sitting behind the guy and completely irrelevant. And we're just praying for an injury all year. So I like to look for these RB2s that are at least getting maybe 8 to 10 touches on a weekly basis, and they have proven pass down ability and make for theoretical 3-down backs. Why waste a roster spot on a guy that doesn't have RB1 upside? So the 3 backs right now that fit that criteria for me are Tevin Coleman, Corey Clement for the Eagles, and Giovanni Bernard for the Bengals. It might cost a little more than a guy like James Conner, but I think it's worth it because you still have some week-to-week value.
Okay, so that was going to be our follow-up, but you're so smart, you got it off the bat.
Great job, Ian.
So, Reed, some of these handcuffs might be worth taking even if the man ahead of him doesn't suffer an injury.
Yep.
So, Reed, who's going to have the biggest role?
Yeah, I think the guys that Ian is mentioning are good. At some guys that I would add to that, you look at Frank Gore. Like Frank Gore is sort of, he's the fountain of youth. This guy is amazing in terms of the latter part of his career, and he's still around. And reports out of Miami saying that he's going to be part of this offense. Why? And Kenyon Drake, we saw what he did toward the latter part of the last season. He's one of these elite guys in terms of his cutability. So Frank Gore is someone that I'm looking at who could get those 5 to 10 touches, could get those red zone targets, or those touches that could have touchdown upside if for whatever reason Drake misses time. Chris Ivory is another one out of Buffalo. That situation with Shady McCoy is so up in the air. So if you're looking at Chris Ivory late in the teen rounds, you could get an RB2 late in rounds that could get you 15 to 18 touches. We saw it in Jacksonville, what he could potentially do. A little bit older back, but those are 2 guys that I'd be targeting in terms of the guys who could make an impact.
Thanks, Ian and Reed, for helping us get our rosters right. Now, before we get back to baseball, let's hear from Pat Mayo on some high-priced targets in the upcoming Dell Technologies Championship.
When you're looking at the very top of the list this week, obviously Dustin comes in at number 1 in the pricing. He is 11,600. Yeah, that's a hefty price tag. JT, the defending champ, 11.4. Brooks, 11. Then Rory, Day, and Spieth are still all above $10,000. Do you have a particular lean right off the hop? Because I think I like Justin Thomas by far the best.
I mean, what do you think I'm going to say?
I know you're going to say Rory.
That's right. So yeah, I like Rory the best, obviously. Besides that, I think a lot of people are going to do this. I would take the little savings. I like Rory, Day, and Spieth more than I like DJ, JT, and Brooks. I haven't built, it's only Monday, but I just think that if you give me a discount on those guys with ownership, say it's roughly the same, I don't mind that. I was on Spieth pretty heavy last week. I thought he played better than he scored. Got himself into major trouble. He missed a 6-inch putt like an idiot. If I had to go all the way to the top, I'm with you. I like JT more than I like DJ. He's had success. He just plays well. It seems firing on all cylinders. But for me, I'm more interested in the 10K range than the 11K range.
So with a field like this where it's only 98 players as of right now, so Ricky's not playing, Molinari's not playing, and the other 98 inside the top 100 are there, we could see some more withdrawals as the week goes along, where it's all on a Friday lock that people might give an extra day before they WD. So always check out the column on dkplaybook.com. I'll have that updated when people withdraw. But do you think that leaving some money on the table here is the move to help differentiate your teams? Because it seems like all the picks should be concentrated in one spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think I lean that more than a standard week, but even when I do that, I keep it within reason. I don't think there's any situation where I like to leave like more than, $500 max. I'm not one of those people. I know some people leave, even $1,000 or more on the table. I think there's always a spot to upgrade. I don't mind doing it. It's more if I have a team that's flat 50,000 and I don't see any leverage on it, then I try to adjust and make sure I have pricing as my unique differentiation.
Well, with this pricing and so many people making the cut, like even there's going to be no MDF, so it's plausible. Like 80 guys made the cut last week. 80 of the 98 could make the cut this week. So do you treat it like a WGC a little bit, that you can go pure stars and scrubs here?
Yeah, I do. I mean, if your guy's playing so bad that he's going to get cut, you're in probably pretty big trouble anyway. Obviously, the extra 36 holes, guys can make moves, but I treat it almost like a no cut. Just be really aggressive. It's tough to really, the guys who are very steady, good cut makers, a lot of that's negated in a situation like this because, like you just said, you're going to have 80% of the field possibly making this cut.
It's a lot like the Masters in that way, I would suppose, because that field can be that field can be like 85 players, the top 50 in ties make it, anyone within 10, but there's also like 20 guys in that field who just aren't making the cut. So
that's right.
The higher percentage of like reasonable plays are going to make the cut.
Yeah, that's the thing with this. Like, it's 100 guys, but there's no Ian Woosnans and there's normal people at the bottom. So it is kind of like that without like the real bad people. So this stars and scrubs, you can do it. It's just, we'll get to it. Obviously the 6K range is a little dicey even for me though.
Well, that's why people need to go into the comment section and let us know who their favorite plays in the 6K range.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to read that.
Non-Luke List division are going to be, so we can use a few of these guys and we'll talk about the ones that pop for us. But I think that, is it plausible that a way to differentiate yourself this week, that instead of dropping into that area almost at a hard cap at $7,000 and build a more balanced approach? Because it seems like a lot of people will go stars and scrubs because you can, and the ability to get all 6 guys through the cut is going to be there for that type of lineup.
Yeah, I think you're going to hear a lot about stars and scrubs for the reasons we're talking about. It's easier to get them through. You can load up on those top end guys. I have more interest in balanced right off the bat. Little worried about how it's going to come together, to be honest, but I think there's always ways to mix it up. You just want to be cognizant of what you're doing and treat it. I always try to see my teams as one entity. It's 6 guys, but they have to gel together, whether it's correlating the lineup or just making sure that the ownership as a whole makes sense.
Welcome back to Steve, Zach, and Julian, who are here to help us build our baseball lineups for tonight's slate.
And because this is the sweat and we encourage fighting between our analysts, allow me to introduce the segment that is loved by many and hated by none, allegedly. Put up your bukes. Steve, we need a couple picks for the night along with some DK point projections.
Yeah, definitely not allegedly. That's been confirmed by multiple sources, so you don't need to say that anymore.
Okay, that's fine.
We're going to start with Jack Flaherty. What are you confused, Julian? We're going to start with Jack Flaherty for 26 DK fantasy points. Of all the pitchers tonight that are above 10,000, he's my favorite of the bunch there. I think he's going to be on the lower side of ownership of the high price options because we have some absolutely stellar names going tonight. At home, he has a 281 WOBA with a 3.74 FIP. He's already faced the Pirates 4 times already this season. 22 innings pitched, allowing 7 runs on 18 hits with an 18-7 K to walk ratio. Last start against the club, which was earlier this month, which is really when the Pirates offense really started to slide. 28.5 DK fantasy points earlier this month. You should be rostering a pitcher that is over 10K tonight, Julian and Zach. So this should be the guy that you're looking at.
Julian, there are 7 guys, 7 pitchers, 10K or more tonight. Jack Flaherty is Steve's guy, projecting him for 26 DK fantasy points. Do you agree with that estimate?
Yeah, well, I'm going to fade Steve saying that you don't need to plug his own segment anymore because he's the one that does that every day. But I do have to agree with him and chase Flaherty here. He was one of the guys I mentioned off the top of the show that if I am paying up for a pitcher, I really like Flaherty. And I think that Carlos Carrasco, who's $100 cheaper than him, is going to be a really popular option. So I think you can get some really good ownership numbers on Flaherty.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I like the pick here. He has 28 or more DK points essentially in each of his last 4 games, one of them against this very Pirates lineup. He's only allowed 10 total hits in that 4-game span, so he's pitching really well overall. Since the All-Star break, he's had a strikeout rate in the low 30%, which is pretty much comparable to Max Scherzer. So there's a lot to like here. You pay down a couple $1,000 from Scherzer, or you pivot off Carrasco and get yourself Jack Flaherty.
Well, my dude Zach, it's obvious you disagree with this. You want to tell us why?
Well, I like Flaherty. He just doesn't get the strikeouts consistently enough. He's only had double-digit strikeouts 3 times this season. The next 2 starts, he had 4 strikeouts and 5 strikeouts. 22 innings against the Pirates this season, only 18 strikeouts. And he's only made it to this number that Steve's got him at once in his last 9 starts at home. He's actually better on the road. So just because it's a home start doesn't mean it's a good start. My guys up top, definitely going DeGrom. DeGrom, he does not need to even get wins to put up huge fantasy points.
I like you, Zach. You disagree with Steve, and then you give us a solid argument as to why.
Yeah.
Steve, your second Buke is who?
Are we watching the same show? What was the solid argument?
I enjoyed everything Zach just said.
Okay, well you can be buddies with him now instead. I gotta go with Daniel Palka for. I gotta go with Daniel Palka here for 16 DK fantasy points. He's going up against Lance Lynn. You know anything about Lance Lynn there, Julian? Have you heard anything about him?
I know a lot about Lance Lynn.
Yeah, we'll talk about that abomination later. Look, we all know that Lynn struggles against lefties. So here's just a gentle reminder of what that comes out to. 377 WOBA with a 5.53 FIP, a 39% hard hit rate. Palka has fantastic power against righties, 259 isolated power with 17 of his 19 home runs. He's only 4,200 in a great spot tonight, and he's batting cleanup for the White Sox, who have 5 lefties in that lineup tonight. But go ahead, Julian. Let's hear about why he's not a great pick.
Well, I'm going to fade Daniel Palka here. The hitting conditions are great. Hitting cleanup is great. But I'm fading the matchup here against Lance Lynn, who was one of your Bukes last week. What
does that have to do with anything?
That means you think he's pitching well. In his 3 starts against the White Sox this season, he's been really good, striking Palka out half the times that they've faced each other. I just think that Lance Lynn is in a good spot tonight. I much prefer targeting him rather than targeting White Sox hitters. And the last time Lynn faced this White Sox lineup, he put up 36 DraftKings points against them. So I think we have some history here that says that Lynn can succeed in this matchup, whether people want to roster White Sox because they happen to go off one time against the Yankees or not.
Zach just channeled his inner Steve Buchanan and gave us a hard eye roll.
I try. I'm fading both you guys. You don't play Palka. You don't play Lynn. There are lefties you want against Lance Lynn, but Palka's had only your 16 DraftKings fantasy points once in his last 18 games. He's got 1 home run his last 15 games. Go with his teammate, Nicky Delmonico, cheaper, 4 home runs in his past 10 games and 12 plus DKFP in 5 of his last 9. Plus Mr. BVP, he's 3 for 6 against Lance.
Oh, wow, Zach.
Where do you get this 18 games from? What the hell kind of number is that? You know, in the past 7 games, this guy hasn't done this. Where do you get that metric from? 18 games?
It's called a number that suits his agenda.
Thank you, Julian.
He hit a home run 19.
Suits his agenda. That's perfect. Perfect.
I didn't know what it would take to ever get Steve and Julian to get along, but apparently it's Zach.
Oh, no, I'm still fading Steve. But
well, you guys just
I like making arguments that suit my agenda.
There you go. That's true.
All right, thanks, guys. We're going to be back with you in just a little bit to get Julian's Hidden Jewels.
Steve's favorite segment. In the meantime, I recently caught up with Reds great Tom Browning, and despite Joey Votto being on the DL, we got to the bottom of his value.
And he's the kind of guy that can kind of carry a team for a couple weeks at a time. His work ethic, how he goes about preparing himself for the game, I think is a pretty good thing for the young kids to watch, to see. I always talk to them about spring training, watch all the veterans, how they go about their business, because they are preparing for the season. And Joey's no different, and Joey just kind of separates himself from a lot of guys because his work ethic. I mean, he doesn't like failure, and he's pretty good at what he does.
Now, Suarez is among the NL's best in batting average, on-base percentage, slugging, home runs, RBIs. Is he in the MVP discussion?
Oh, I think so, absolutely. He's had an incredible year, and he missed the first 3 weeks after he got hit on a thumb or something. So, yeah, he's definitely an MVP candidate for certain. He's had an unbelievable year, and I think he's kind of solidified that third base position as well. But yeah, I think definitely an MVP candidate.
Now, a lot of people thought Scooter Gennett wouldn't be able to replicate last year's breakout season. He has defied those odds. What do you think has helped him to keep up the pace?
You know, he's just a confident guy. Excuse me, I got the chance to speak with him yesterday, you know, and he was born in Cincinnati, although he was raised in Sarasota, Florida. I said, your heart's here, so this is probably where you're going to play the best. But he's just a confident kid. He thinks he's a big leaguer and an all-star, and he's certainly played like it. And, you know, I just hope he continues it. I mean, I don't think it's a fluke. I mean, he came in last year and opened up some eyes, but I think he opened up more eyes this year by coming out here and repeating what he did last year.
Now, who else on this team has surprised you so far this season?
I think Tucker Barnhart, not his defense, but his offense, what he's able to do to help us out offensively. I don't think he was ever looked at as maybe an offensive threat, but he's certainly put himself in that position now. He's a pretty good second place hitter. I think he's hit fifth and sixth. And, most catchers hit down to the bottom of the lineup, but Tucker stuck out a little bit. I thought he's you know, Jesse Winker, although he just went on the shelf for the rest of the year, was another guy I thought had Rookie of the Year candidate. A couple of these pitchers, you know, Sal Romano and Tyler Mahle have gotten better. You know, I think, you know, when you get these young guys, you put them in the kind of situation that we did, sink or swim kind of thing. I think they figured it out, and I think they've been a little bit, certainly of the outside of yesterday. With Tyler, but he didn't have a bad day, he just had a short day. But I think Tucker and Winker were the two guys that I thought that have kind of stepped up a little.
Now, I've got kind of a big picture question for you. What do you think of this era of baseball? In 1985, you threw 261 innings. 6 times in your career, you started at least 36 games. Nowadays, teams are worried with pitch counts, injuries, stuff like that. Do you think pitchers are treated with kid gloves nowadays?
I think they're more protective, you know, and I have to say, I think it's probably because of the money. My first year, I think I made $40,000, or I think we ended up getting $60,000 a year. So, and now it's $500,000 in your first year in the big league. So, I think they're going to be a little bit more protective. The pitch counts, you know, I think apply to some. I don't think it apply to everybody. You know, innings pitched, all that stuff. You know, as a starter, your job as a starter, my day was to really basically go 9 innings or get us into as deep of the game as we could with a chance to win. Nowadays with the 8-man bullpens, you know, 6 innings is about the norm for these guys now. I'd like to see them go a little bit deeper, but again, I think because of the money and how much they're invested in these guys, they're a little bit more protected.
Got to protect that investment. Now, why is Great American Ballpark known as a hitter-friendly park?
It's not very big. Well, right center field, if they get the ball up a little bit, you know, right-handers can flip it out of there in right center field, and the ball seems to travel a little bit in left field. But Cincinnati's always been a pretty good place to hit, even in the old stadium. But, you know, it's a friendly confines. It's not a big ballpark. You can certainly pitch here, but right center field is a gap that right-handers can get to, or at least the fence, they can get to that pretty easily. But it's always been a good park to hit. But I think the background and the fact that the fences are a little bit shorter.
And just a heads up, Brew Crew at Cincy tonight with Milwaukee.
Milwaukee.
Come on, man. I like to combine like 3 different
Yeah.
words here. Milwaukee likely being a popular stack. Yeah, okay. Milwaukee likely.
Sound it out slowly. Okay, but now peep this. Karin Phillips and RotoWire's Nick Whalen here to talk some fantasy basketball. So here in Boston, both Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward are on track to be full speed for training camp and the season. So what's the fantasy impact on Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum? A couple of guys who shined in the playoffs when Irving and Hayward were injured. What do you think about this one, Karin?
Jason Tatum is fine. Like, that guy's going to be okay. I have this weird prediction that when the season gets rolling, he'll be the Celtics' second best player. The person to worry about here is Jaylen Brown. Look, I'm a fan of the guy. He's great. He can guard 1 through 5. He can play 1 through 5 sometimes. You can put that guy anywhere on the court on the offensive, defensive side of the ball, and he will flourish. But in the pecking order thing, that team is going to go Kyrie Irving, Jason Tatum, Gordon Hayward, and then you throw in Al Horford and Terry Rozier and Marcus Morris, whoever they got. And Jaylen Brown is just going to suffer just from the depth chart there alone. And somebody's not going to be able to start in that 5 pieces that they have. And when you work in some of their role players, it just may be a better fit without one of those guys not starting. And if it's going to be someone, it's going to be Jaylen Brown. So look for him because Jason Tatum is going to get his buckets.
Nick, do you agree? Do you think Jaylen Brown's going to be the guy who gets the bump?
Yeah, I think technically that's probably going to be the case, but I also don't think it means that Jaylen Brown's just going to fall off a cliff and, all of a sudden we're just going to forget about it. But I think it means that he might not progress quite to the level that he would if he were somewhere else. I think it's pretty realistic for Jaylen Brown to put up, similar type of numbers that he did last season in his second NBA season. He's just probably not going to make the leap that he would make, if Gordon Hayward, weren't coming back at this team or if Jason Tatum weren't there. It's kind of an unprecedented situation. I mean, we've really never seen a team that's this good, that has this much depth, and is really poised in the next couple of years to maybe add even more depth. I know this isn't exactly relevant to, the upcoming fantasy basketball season, but whether Kyrie's with this team long-term or not, Boston has its own pick next year. It might have the Grizzlies pick. It might have the Clippers pick. And it's probably going to get the Sacramento Kings pick as well. So this is going to be a situation that, we're addressing now going into 2018-19, but I don't know that it's going to be any different in the coming years.
So a lot of Celtics going to be drafted here in the next few years on the fantasy side of things is what you're trying to tell us. But the newest Raptor, Kawhi Leonard, according to reports, looks remarkable in off-season workouts. An ADP of 7, likely a high-priced DFS play as well. So obviously in the weaker Eastern Conference now, LeBron is not. How does that impact Kawhi's fantasy value here, Nick?
Him having an ADP of 7 is a little ridiculous to me. Part of it is due to the fact that there are just so many elite players. And to me, there are still some question marks with Kawhi Leonard. Everything that we're hearing right now is the quad's healing up well. He seems to be warming up to Toronto, about as much as you would hope, given that when he was first traded there were some serious question marks about, how much he would actually buy in. But at the same time, the fact that he has an ADP higher than that of LeBron James is kind of crazy to me. I was on the show a couple weeks ago and I did express some mild concerns about LeBron adjusting to LA and what that's all going to entail. But any question that you're going to bring up about LeBron adjusting to a new situation, I think you can ask about Kawhi as well. And the fact that Kawhi, played parts of 9 games last year and LeBron played 82 games last year. To me, that's a pretty big concern. And, it might not be until November or December where, you can finally start to feel good about Kawhi Leonard, being back healthy. And to me, that's still a big if.
Sounds like a big wait and see for you, Nick. What about for you, Karin? A high risk, high reward situation here.
It's a longer wait and see for me. Like, I think a lot of this with Kawhi Leonard in Toronto is going to deal with things that aren't a part of basketball per se, but can affect how you actually play the game. I love his game. I love the way he locks guys down. I love the way he can score. But I do not like guys who don't talk. And when you're not a good communicator and you're going to a new team that has been embarrassing in the playoffs the last couple of years, that has a brand new head coach, you've got to establish a relationship. And that guy doesn't like to talk at all. So I'm wondering how this thing is even going to work. And we haven't even started talking about the injuries and how he's progressed from that. But I'm going to really wait and see with Kawhi Leonard, because when's the last time we've really seen him play a lot of basketball?
Yeah, you'd have to go back like 2 Mays ago.
Yeah, it's
Exactly.
a long time.
Yeah.
All right, now talking draft strategy. What are some mistakes to avoid making in the first round of NBA fantasy drafts? Karin, what do you think?
Don't fall for the okie doke. That's my rule. Don't get caught up in the advanced stats and all the logistics and the points. My wise words of wisdom would be to like actually watch games.
All right, so the eye test, right?
Yeah, the eye test. Like Summer League just happened. You can really tell if you watch who's really good and actually who's kind of good just on a bad team. So pay attention to those little things.
Nick, advice for people.
One thing I would say right now is, if you're picking maybe in the mid to late first round, I would consider the value of taking one of the elite centers. I'm talking Nikola Jokic, Karl Anthony Towns, obviously Anthony Davis is kind of the king of those three, because there's a bit of a gap, beyond that top tier before you get into some of the centers who are a little bit more flawed. I mean, guys like Joel Embiid, DeMarcus Cousins, with those two, you're worried about games played. With Andre Drummond and DeAndre Jordan, you're worried about free throw percentage. With Dwight Howard, Rudy Gobert, those guys don't score all that much. They don't give you any three-pointers. The first three guys I mentioned, Jokic, Towns, and Davis, they do it all. And right now, there are a lot of elite centers, but those three are kind of in their own tier. And if you don't get one of those three, it makes it a little bit harder to find value at that position. Whereas at point guard, for example, you can afford to pass on Russell Westbrook or James Harden or Stephen Curry. Obviously you want all three of those guys or any of those three on your team, but you can make up that value in rounds 2 or 3. There's so much depth at that position that, the drop off in the top 2-3 point guards the next tier, to me, isn't quite as drastic as it is at the center spot.
All right, great information, guys. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Karin. We appreciate it. We are all out of time for the NBA chatter right now. We have a special treat coming in the form of Alex Jankowski here to get us ready for tomorrow at the U.S. Open, rocking the lobster shirt, looking hot, buddy.
All right, so Alex, how do you attack this slate? Just take us through that.
Yeah, I think overall when it comes to DFS tennis, there's a bit of a learning curve. I mean, if you look at it, the game just came out at Wimbledon, and I think a lot of people gravitated toward targeting aces because it's the only single point event where you can earn DK points. And, so we wanted to target the John Isners, the Raoniches, the Pliskova sisters. But I think what we're learning now is it's just more important to get straight set victories, more so than going 4 or 5 sets in the men's game or 3 sets in the women's game and hoping you make it up with aces. It's just not going to happen. So you want straight set victories. And what that means on the men's side, it's paying up. What it means on the women's side, where because you're only at most playing 3 sets, there's a lot more variance there. So you can pay down a little bit more at the women's game, look for more of those upsets. So for me, it's paying up at the men, the guys who are going to get those 3-set victories. For the women, it's trying to find those underdogs a little bit more, some of those lower priced options who could pull an upset potentially just in 2 sets, but in 3 sets more likely.
All right, Alex, you're talking about paying up on the men's side. So how about some high price targets you are looking at? And feel free to include the women as well.
Yeah, so look, I'm going to start at the top, and I'm just going to talk about Rafael Nadal, 10,600. He's the most expensive player on the slate, but for good reason. You're just talking about the floor that you get. In the past 10 years at the U.S. Open, when you look at his first and his second round matches, he's never lost, and out of 45 possible sets, he's won 42 of them. So at the end of the day, you're talking about a guy who in 10 years has only dropped 3 sets in the first 2 rounds at the US Open, as much of a lock as there is to get you that 3-set victory. So just pay up. I get Del Potro's also in a very good spot, but after that, the bottom really drops off. I don't really see anyone else providing the floor of a 3-set victory. So I just say go up to Nadal. On the women's game, like I said, I'm not really looking to pay up much. If I am, it's Serena Williams, 10,400, going up against a player who, for the first time this year, is in the second round of a slam. So plenty of narratives, plenty of motivation for Serena, prospect of facing potentially her sister in the next round, in the third round. She dictates so many points on her own that I think, she's in good form right now. I think can get you the 2-set victory there.
All right, how about a value pick if you're not looking to spend all that heavy cash?
Sure. On the women's end, I'm looking at Camila Giorgi. I mentioned the potential matchup of Serena versus Venus in round 3. I don't think Venus gets there because I like Camila Giorgi on upset alert here. $6,500 for her. All she's done in slams so far this year is give seeded players a run for their money. Upset Sevastova in the first round of Wimbledon. Went on all the way to the quarterfinals where she faced Serena. Took her to 3 sets. Won the first set pretty convincingly. And then anytime she's lost in the other 2 slams, it's been in 3 sets against higher seeded opponents. She's a hard hitter. I like her to control the pace on the hard court. I like her there on the women's side. And on the men's side, I'm looking at Steve Johnson, looking at an American maybe to make a little bit of a run here at the U.S. Open. He's going up against Dominic Thiem, a player who I really like, but definitely a clay court player. He's at 8,000. Steve Johnson down at 6,200. And when these guys face each other on hard court, they've only done it once, and Steve Johnson has won. They faced each other 2 other times on clay, and Thiem has won because he's a clay court player, but both of those have gone at least 3 sets. So I like Steve Johnson there to potentially provide some value. Maybe he doesn't pull off the win, but I like him to go maybe 4 sets, maybe even 5 against Thiem. I do want to throw out one other name there as well. On the women's side, Jill Teichmann, she's $4,900, 21-year-old, bit of an unknown. But there's a severe price gap between there and her opponent, Kaya Kanepi, who's in the $9,000 range. She's not a $9,000 player, coming off the biggest win of her career against Simona Halep, the 1 seed. You wonder if there's a bit of a drop-off there coming off such an emotional high. So Teichmann, 2,100, like I said, bit of an unknown. But at 4,900 in the women's game where there is so much variance, I kind of like that maybe in a GPP.
All right, finally, we need your slate-approved U.S. Open picks. Hit us with them.
Yeah, not really reinventing the wheel here. It's going to be Rafael Nadal. I mentioned 42 of a possible 45 set victories in his 10 years at the U.S. Open in the first and second round. He's going to be able to do it so many different ways. Like I mentioned, if we're not targeting aces as much, you don't have to worry about that as much with him. It's more about getting the breaks, getting those straight set victories. So yeah, it's not the sexiest pick. Well, it depends how you look at it, but yeah, 10,600 for Nadal. He is my slate approved pick.
All right, Alex, try reinventing the wheel next time, please. We appreciate it.
No problem.
Tyler Sullivan here with your DraftKings Fantasy Flash. It hasn't been pretty for the Red Sox recently, losing 5 of their last 7, and All-Star Mookie Betts has been one of Boston's biggest bats that have gone silent. Over the last 2 weeks, Betts is batting just .195 to go along with just 2 extra base hits. In his last 10 games, Betts has only been able to muster 2 double-digit fantasy outings, which would make one wonder about fading him until he starts showing signs of life at the plate. On Tuesday, Betts is pricing in at $5,800 for the slate, and despite that poor play as of late, he still does have one of the highest ceilings and safest floors on the slate as they're set to take on the Marlins. Jose Urena is set to take the hill for Miami on Tuesday, and Betts is hitting .330 to go along with 19 home runs against righties this season.
Welcome back, everyone, to our final segment of the show, and welcome back to Julian, Steve, and Zach as we prepare for Steven's favorite segment, as you can see by the facial expression.
Yeah.
Taking a nap.
Oh, a nap. No,
Actually,
no naps.
hang tight, please, because we
No
have 12
naps.
minutes left in the show, and we need your help to fill.
We do. So the segment in question, that would be Hidden Jewels. So, Julian, we are here for your value plays of the night. Tell us who you think is a diamond in the rough. Your first pick, please.
Well, this one is just dedicated to Steve because once I saw that pick on Palka, I decided to go with Lance Lynn here at $7,800, who I still believe is going to be very overlooked in this spot. Look, we talked a lot about him in Buke's segment, but although this lineup is stacked with lefties, Lynn is still in a good spot. He has a 30% strikeout rate against these very bats that he is facing. He strikes them out 30% of the time. That's an elite rate at nearly 100 at-bats that we're going with for a sample size here. So that is a real thing. When people are going to be paying down at pitching for this fool's gold that we all kind of agreed on the perceived value for a guy like Felix Hernandez, I think this $7,000 to $8,000 range has a lot more value. And I'll be honest with you guys, because this show is not about making me look good. It's about making our viewers money. As the day goes on, I like Matt Boyd at $7,600 even more. I'll save my own $600 once
That's
again.
my guy.
But now, since we have so much time with the show, I'm giving you 2 picks for 7,600 and 7,800.
Wow.
Matt Boyd at Kansas City and Lance Lynn, I still like very much against the Chicago White Sox.
Steve, I feel like you might have something to say about that.
Holy crap, like, this is what's wrong with this segment. He's sitting there telling you, well, as the day went on, I actually kind of changed my pick. I don't like Lynn as much as I used to. Now I like this.
I like Lynn just as much as I used to like him. I just like Matt Boyd more now.
Okay, Julian, you gotta listen, man. Listen, you said it even yourself. Even though this lineup is stacked with lefties, that's the problem. Lynn can't get lefties out. And now you're going to throw this guy in your lineup tonight? Absolutely not. The White Sox have 5 guys in their lineup that bat from the left side tonight. You feel good about that? And then tack on the fact that this is the same pitcher who's allowed 10 runs on 15 hits in 9 1/3 innings to the Blue Jays and the Marlins his last 2 games out. Sure, his salary is friendly, but I just don't like this spot for him at all. At this range, you're much better off with Boyd. That's not a bad one. But look at Julio Teheran against the Rays tonight. They lose their DH, and now they're going to a National League ballpark and facing Teheran. And like I said, Boyd against the pathetic Royals, yeah, I can definitely go with that. Dude, Lynn, you are stretching, man. Hidden glass. It's back. Hidden glass. We break the jewels because they're fragile. No. Lynn, forget it.
Zach, what about you? How do you feel about Lance Lynn for 7.8?
Yeah, not feeling Lance Lynn. I've been in on Boyd since this morning, so you must have read my targets there, Julian.
Oh, boy.
Much better lately. He's against the Royals. Lynn's given up, like Steve said, 5 runs in each of his last 2 starts against the Marlins and Blue Jays. So even though it's against the White Sox, I'm not going in on Lynn.
All right, sounds
I didn't hear anything there about the 30% strikeout rate. That's a real number. 28 strikeouts and 97 at-bats.
Ooh, Julian, clap him back.
Go ahead, Jack. You can take that one. You look like you're going to say something good.
I was just going to say that's against the White Sox. Look at his strikeout numbers against everybody, and you'll see that that's a little bit high.
Well, guess what? He's playing the White Sox.
Regression.
Regression. That's it.
Look, there's too many guys.
with it, man.
Regression. All right. Julian, let's get your second jewel, please.
Yeah, let's get
All right. Typically, I try and keep the bats under $4,000 in this segment, but with 15
That's real nice
games
of you.
and so many really expensive bats on the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Red Sox, I'm going with Mike Moustakas at 4,400 here. I think he is going to be, although he's not cheap, very overlooked on this slate. There's 2 third base eligible players that you can pay up over $5,000 for on that Dodgers lineup. The Yankees have Gleyber Torres at 4,200, who's going to garnish a lot of ownership. But you've got Moustakas in this opposite hand matchup against Anthony DeSclafani of the Reds in Cincinnati. It's a fantastic matchup for Moustakas. I don't like that he's hitting 6th. I was hoping that he was hitting somewhere 3 through 5. But even with him sliding back there, he's still hit homers in 2 of his last 3 games. And DeSclafani has allowed 17 home runs in 80 innings this season, 12 of them to left-handed bats. So he's got the matchup working for him. He's got the ballpark working for him. And although he's not a hidden jewel in terms of price point, I think he will be in terms of ownership on this slate.
All right, Steve, what do you think of this one? Is it still hidden glass or is it hidden jewels?
No, this one's decent because you know what? I've written up Moustakas a lot, so I'm sure Julian just picked out from that. And look, it's not hard.
You guys' articles.
Yeah. It's not hard to like him in this spot. I mean, I'm a Moose guy. I love Moustakas, so I'm always taking him in these types of matchups. He's 4,400 tonight, which I actually think is a perfect price point for him because he might just be a little too expensive to seriously consider, but he's cheap enough that he's not going to kill you in salaries. Like Julian said, against lefties, DeSclafani owns a 360 WOBA with 12 of his 17 home runs allowed. Moose has fantastic power against righties. 241 ISO on the year with a 344 WOBA and a 45% hard hit rate. This is the type of matchups that the Brewers got this guy for. He's absolutely in play tonight, and you're probably going to get him at low ownership because this is a huge 15-game slate that we have going tonight. He hasn't been talked about hasn't been talked about much across the board and what I've been seeing. So I love this spot for him. But of course, Julian must have read something that I read, so I'm not going to give him the credit for it.
Zach, what about you? Would you pay 4.4?
I would. I really like Moose tonight. The only problem with him now is that we all agree on him. So there's not that much to fight about.
Yeah, wow, what a bummer. Dang it.
Hey, Julian,
Don't worry.
this might be
We
your
got
first
something to talk
sweep.
about here.
Oh, okay, all right, you heard the man. All right, Julian, your third jewel.
Yeah, this crap.
Ahmed Rosario leading off for the Mets at 3,300. Apparently people don't like this one, but Rosario scored between 10 and 19 DK points in 3 of his last 4 games. He's been a different player since the Mets inserted him into the leadoff role, and his salary has dropped $700 since these last 4 games because of this matchup against Cole Hamels tonight. Look, Cole Hamels has been really good in his 3 starts with the Cubs, but we've got terrific hitting conditions at Wrigley Field yet again. So I'm not telling you this guy's going to go off for 20-plus fantasy points here, but I'm saying with this type of slate, if you're going to be paying up big for those 10K pitchers, paying up for Dodgers, Yankees, Red Sox, wherever, this guy is going to be a salary saver that is not going to hurt you whatsoever. Manny Machado is going to be a really popular option at shortstop for $5,500 in both cash and tournaments. So when people are paying up at that position, you can save yourself over $2,000 and get yourself a nice little play here with 10 to 15 point potential. That has value in it.
But Zach, you like Cole Hamels.
I do like Cole Hamels. He's been really good in his 5 starts with the Cubs. 3, he's been really good in 3, but he's been all good in all 5. I like Hamels, so I don't like Rosario, but he's so cheap. I mean, he gets a stolen base, and you're good. So I'm okay with the pick.
Oh, wow, Steve, you said it was garbage. Zach doesn't seem to necessarily agree.
Yeah, you know why Zach agrees? Because Julian just pulled one of the Zach moves where it's like, oh, well, in 4 games, he's done this. It's good for me, so that's going to be my argument thing. Last 3 or 4 games, he's done this. What's he done over the last 30 games, Julian? Let me guess. It's probably not that good.
He hasn't been leading off for 30 games.
Quiet. Probably not that good, because it isn't. Sure, he's got some decent numbers against lefties on the road. I'll give you that. 340 WOBA with a 170 isolated power. We definitely do need to save some salary here. He's not on my radar at all. Sure, he gets you some occasional power, but if you want to save some salary, look at Ketel Marte. He's at the same price against the lefty Madison Bumgarner. Do you know what Marte has done against lefties? Let me know. Do you know? No, you don't. So let me tell you. 392 WOBA with a 248 isolated power with a 45% hard hit rate. Guess what? This isn't that stupid, oh, he's done this in 13 games. That's what he's done all season long. That's a sample size for you right there. Who has the better upside here? Rosario and his occasional 1 home run every 3 months, or Marte with his season-long good numbers? I'll let you guys.
I would say Rosario over Ketel Marte's 5.4 DraftKings points per game over his last 10 games.
You know what? This should be called Hidden Jewels featuring Zach, because you two both have no idea what you're talking about, and Marte's going to outscore Rosario in this spot.
Before we get to slate-approved picks, gentlemen, how about a home run watch? Little bonus question here. So if you got someone who's guaranteed to go yard tonight, give it to us, please. We'll start with you, Steve.
Well, it's definitely going to be Palka, because he's going to go off against Lance Lynn, because Lance Lynn can't handle lefties. You should have picked that for your hidden jewel.
Ooh.
Oh, wow, Julian. Would you like
I'll tell you what. I'm going to use this segment to give you another hidden jewel. Brandon Lowe with the Tampa Bay Rays, $2,900. He has scored 9 or more points in his last 3 games, including a 21-point outburst.
Oh, 3 games.
This guy is a good salary saver and eligible at second base and in the outfield.
Zach, who's sending presents to the people?
Edwin Encarnacion, 4 home runs in his career against Kyle Gibson, and he's hit, I think it's 3 in his 5 games back. So
okay. Wow.
Encarnacion.
You had a nod of approval from Steve. Not everyone gets that.
Yeah, that's kind of actually huge for you. So congratulations. But before we actually let you go, we need you to hit us with those slate-approved picks. So Zach, who's your guy?
I love Jose Altuve at his price. He's been hitting well after an 0-for-3 coming back, and I think you can use him while he's a little bit cheaper. I think the Astros overall are a little bit underpriced, and I think Altuve is the way to go.
All right. What about you, Julian?
I'm actually going to go with Matt Boyd here. I really like him in a price point that I don't think many people are going to be paying for pitching.
Steve, slate approved.
Oh my.
Look at these 2 cowards. They didn't even bring up Boyd, and they didn't bring up – who the hell did Zach say? I already forgot because it was terrible. I mean, if you like them so much, then talk about them. You don't even talk about them. I'm going to go with Jack Flaherty because I'm not a coward, and I brought up Jack Flaherty. I said, that was my dude tonight. These guys are bringing up people we didn't even talk about. Oh, Altuve. We didn't even
When would I have brought that up?
When do you not recall me bringing up Matt Boyd? Why'd we talk about him then?
Oh, yeah, you had to slide him in there because we had to fill some time. You know, coward.
Okay.
That was my slate approved pick.
Coward.
Want me to bring him up when we talk about the Dodgers?
Coward.
All right, you three, we have 15 seconds left. It's not enough time for you guys to finish your argument. Thank you, all three of you, for your generosity to this program this evening.
No problem.
Love that positivity there, Steven.
Yeah, just love that.
Okay, that's our show. Did you learn anything today?
Yeah,
real
I
quick?
did. I learned that Steve will never stop referring to hidden jewels as hidden glass.
Yep, that's
as
true.
As long as he lives.
And
Did
I
you learn
learned
anything?
that, Alex Jankowski has great fashion sense. I have a very similar shirt to the one he was wearing with a bunch of lobsters on it. Has a bunch of anchors on it. I think Reed has the same shirt.
Oh, that's weird. Actually, that was your shirt. Well, that's going to do it for the show. This has been The Sweat. I'm Jessie Coffield. He's Emerson Lotzia, and we will be back here tomorrow at 6 p.m.